Maddie Okon was not the average girl from Surulere. She was a first-class graduate of accounting from the University of Lagos, known by her lecturers for her brilliance, discipline, and a hunger for success that burned deep within her. All through school, she had one dream: to graduate with honors, secure a good job in one of Nigeria's top firms, and take care of her mother, the only parent she had left. But life, as it often does, had other plans. After her graduation, Maddie had submitted countless applications, walked the hot streets of Lagos, stood in long queues at job fairs, and faced rejection after rejection. Months turned into a year, and desperation crept in. To avoid being idle and slipping into depression, she accepted a job as a house help for a wealthy family in Lekki. The pay was far below her worth, but she did the job with diligence and grace, cleaning floors, ironing expensive clothes, and serving meals with a smile, even when her heart felt heavy. Then came that fateful Thursday morning. She woke up to an email notification on her old cracked phone. It was from Obi Company Co, one of Nigeria's biggest firms. They had reviewed her application and wanted to interview her on Saturday. Joy exploded in her chest. With shaking hands, she reread the mail 10 times, laughing and crying all at once. She took a quick bath, wrapped her hair in a scarf, and dashed out to a boot mall to buy a brown envelope for her documents. As she entered the mall, her eyes caught something that made her stop mid-step: an elderly woman surrounded by two rough-looking boys, being pushed and taunted while passers-by looked away. Without thinking, Maddie dropped her nylon and ran toward the chaos. Mama Rachel Obi, the quiet and dignified matriarch of the powerful Obi family, had decided to take a solo trip to a booty mall that morning. She often enjoyed these rare moments of solitude, away from the guarded gates and luxury of her estate. Her driver had offered to wait, but she declined politely, as always. "I'll call when I'm done," she said, preferring the peace of browsing through shops at her own pace. She planned to pick up a few fruits and essentials, nothing extravagant. What she didn't realize was that in the bustling crowd, someone had skillfully stolen her phone and wallet from her handbag. Oblivious to the theft, Mama Rachel strolled into a luxury home store, admiring the beautifully arranged pieces. One set in particular caught her eye: a delicate Italian porcelain dish set with gold linings. As she reached for it, the plate slipped from her hand and shattered on the tiled floor. Gasps echoed from the staff. Embarrassed, she quickly assured them she would pay. But when she reached into her bag at the checkout counter, she found nothing: her wallet, her cards, her phone, gone. The attendants grew impatient. They didn't recognize her and didn't care to listen. Their voices rose, accusing her of trying to run from responsibility. Within minutes, a crowd formed. Shoppers whispered, some even began recording. Mama Rachel stood there, helpless and humiliated. The young attendants, already irritated, didn't wait for her explanation. "You think this is Alaba Market? This is not your level, madam," one hissed. "You want to play smart, right? We'll call the police." The shouting escalated quickly. Shoppers gathered, whispering, some even recording. Mama Rachel, once one of the most powerful women in Lagos, stood humiliated, unable to prove her identity. It was then that Maddie Okon stepped forward. She had seen the entire incident unfold. Her heart went out to the older woman. Though she didn't know who she was, Maddie couldn't bear to see someone treated so cruelly. The dish set cost $150,000, more than 3 times what she had in her bank account. Without hesitating, Maddie reached into her tote bag and pulled out her iPhone XR, the only valuable item she owned. It was a gift from her mother, bought after months of saving to celebrate her first-class degree. "Please," she said calmly, placing the phone on the counter. "Accept this in place of the payment. This woman didn't mean any harm. Let her go." The store attendants were stunned. Mama Rachel was speechless. In that single moment, something profound passed between the two women: a silent recognition of character, courage, and quiet strength. After the incident at the store, Maddie Okon calmly handed over her phone, collected her change, and quietly walked out. Her heart ached, but her face remained composed. She had quickly transferred her SIM card and a few important items into her small backup Android phone, tucked it into her handbag, and continued with the errand that had brought her to a booty mall in the first place. getting a brown envelope for her documents. Despite what had just happened, Maddie didn't allow herself to dwell on the sacrifice. Deep inside, she felt peace. Some things in life couldn't be measured by money. She scanned the store shelves until she found a neat pack of envelopes and was about to pay when she felt a soft hand touch her arm. She turned and saw the old woman she had helped Mama Rachel, Obi, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, standing beside her. "Why did you do that?" Mama Rachel asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why were you so kind to a stranger?" Maddie smiled. "It costs nothing to be kind," she replied gently, "and God never forgets those who give from a pure heart. Besides, it feels good to leave a mark of goodness wherever you go. This world needs more of that." Mama Rachel was quiet for a moment, then slowly nodded. Without saying much, she asked if she could borrow Maddie's phone to make a call. Maddie handed it over without hesitation. Mama Rachel called her driver, instructing him to come pick her up at the entrance. As they stood together, Mama Rachel noticed the brown envelope in Maddie's hand. "Is that for something important?" she asked kindly. Maddie's eyes lit up. "Yes, Ma. I have an interview this Saturday with Obi Company Co. I'm so happy. I've been praying for an opportunity like this." Mama Rachel blinked, surprised, but she said nothing, just smiled deeply with an emotion Maddie couldn't quite read. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver stepped out to assist Mama Rachel. She turned to Maddie one last time. "Thank you, my dear. God bless you." Maddie waved with a warm smile, completely unaware that she had just touched the heart of the mother of the very CEO whose company she was hoping to work for, and that her life was about to change forever. The grand estate of the Obi family was quiet that evening, bathed in the soft glow of chandelier lights and the faint hum of classical music playing in the background. In her private sitting room, Mama Rachel Obi sat with a cup of warm hibiscus tea in her hands, her eyes gazing into nothingness. But her mind was loud, echoing the voice, the face, and the selfless act of the young woman who had come to her rescue earlier that day. She smiled faintly, shook her head, and sighed. What kind of girl gives up her phone, her only phone, just to help a stranger? She whispered to herself. Despite the wealth that surrounded her, Mama Rachel had always kept her feet grounded. She had seen people at their best and worst, and very little in the world surprised her anymore. But Maddie Okon did. There was something about the girl's spirit, her softness wrapped in strength, her quiet determination, and the kindness in her voice that lingered like perfume. It had been years since anyone outside her family moved her that deeply. The door creaked, snapping her out of her thoughts. Her heart lifted as Xavier Andrews Obi, her grandson, stepped in. Dressed in a charcoal suit, tall and powerfully built, he looked every bit the billionaire CEO the world admired and feared. But to her, he was still that 18-year-old boy who had buried his parents and clung to her like the world had ended. "My boy," she said warmly, standing to welcome him. Xavier leaned down and kissed her cheek, offering her a tired smile. "Good evening, Grandma. You're still up?" he asked as he loosened his tie. Mama Rachel chuckled softly. "I had quite an eventful day." She motioned for him to sit, and the moment he did, she began to speak. Every word tumbled out with passion. How she went to the mall, how her wallet and phone were stolen, how no one came to her aid, until one young woman did. She described the shame she felt, the judgmental eyes, and how that shame was lifted by the bravery of a stranger. She was young, well-spoken, and beautiful, Mama Rachel added, her face glowing. And do you know what she did? She handed over her phone, the only valuable thing she had, just so I wouldn't be humiliated. Xavier raised an eyebrow, the fatigue on his face briefly replaced by curiosity. "She gave you her phone?" "She said it was a gift from her mother for graduating with a first-class degree," Mama Rachel said softly. "And guess what? She's coming for an interview at Obi Company Co. tomorrow." "Can you imagine that, Xavier?" Xavier leaned back surprised. "What a coincidence." "No, my son, not a coincidence, a divine appointment. I want you to pay attention to her. If she's even half as competent as she is kind, don't let her go." Xavier nodded slowly. He had learned over the years not to dismiss his grandmother's instincts. She had built their family with wisdom and heart. He owed her everything. She had lost her husband, lost her children, and had still found the strength to raise him when he was broken. They were all they had, each other. He looked at her, his voice softening. If she's qualified, I'll make sure she gets a fair chance. I promise. Mama Rachel reached over and squeezed his hand. That's all I ask, my dear. That's all I ask. And as Xavier rose and headed to his room, somewhere deep in his heart, a seed of curiosity about this mysterious Maddie Okon had already begun to sprout. Morning broke gently over Lagos, and with it came a storm of emotions in Maddie Okon's heart. She stood by the small mirror in the corner of their modest flat, staring at her reflection. Her hair was neatly packed in a low bun, her white blouse crisp, and the only decent navy blue skirt she owned hugged her waist respectfully. Her shoes, although a little worn around the heels, had been carefully polished the night before. She didn't have a phone anymore. Her earrings were simple studs, and her bag was a small faux leather one she had used since her university days. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that today, she had hope. The night before, after she had returned from the mall, she had broken the news about the phone to her mother. She was nervous, afraid her mother would be angry. But instead, her mother had smiled with a calm only mothers possess. It was just a phone, Maddie, she had said softly. What you gave that woman was worth far more. I'm proud of you, not just because you got a first-class degree, but because you have a heart that shines. They had knelt down to pray, hands clasped tightly. Her mother prayed for favor, peace, and for this opportunity to finally be the open door Maddie had been knocking on since graduation. By the time Maddie stepped out into the humid Lagos morning, she felt nervous but confident today could change everything. When she arrived at Obi Company Co, the building loomed above her, like a giant, intimidating, yet beautiful. She adjusted her blouse, took a deep breath, and made her way inside. She didn't even know her name had already reached the highest floor of that building, spoken repeatedly by the CEO's grandmother, like a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. Inside the interview room, Xavier Andrews Obi reviewed the next file on his tablet. As the door opened and Maddie stepped in, time seemed to pause. Their eyes met. He knew instantly. It was her. The girl. The Maddie Okon his grandmother hadn't stopped talking about the night before. He studied her silently, the way she carried herself with quiet grace, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, and the calm strength behind her nervous smile. She didn't recognize him, of course. To her, he was just another interviewer. But to him, she had already made an unforgettable impression long before she uttered a single word. As the panel launched into questions, Maddie came alive. Every answer she gave was confident, articulate, and well-reasoned. She didn't just know numbers, she understood systems, strategy, and solutions. Her ideas were fresh, her examples practical, and her passion unmistakable. Xavier leaned forward, impressed. How could someone like this be unemployed? By the end of the session, the entire panel was nodding in agreement. There was no debate. Maddie had outshone every candidate they had seen all week. Xavier didn't even wait for deliberation. You'll start first thing Monday morning, he said, smiling. Maddie blinked, caught off guard. Really? Just like that? He leaned back, his voice calm. You earned it. No one's doing you a favor. Her eyes watered, but she held herself steady, thanked the panel, and left with her heart full. That night, back at the Obi estate, Xavier walked into the house with a subtle bounce in his step, something Mama Rachel hadn't seen in years. As they sat for dinner, he began to tell her about the interview, about how brilliant Maddie was, how prepared, how impressive. His eyes lit up when he spoke about her, not just with admiration, but something softer, something warmer. She's a new accounts manager, he announced. Mama Rachel nearly dropped her spoon. Just like that? She deserved it, Grandma. She's sharp, and she didn't come in there asking for pity. She earned her seat. Mama Rachel watched him carefully. Xavier had always been reserved, especially since the loss of his parents. Work consumed him, and he rarely showed interest in people beyond what was necessary. But this was different. There was life in his voice again, And as she listened to him speak of Maddie with such excitement, Mama Rachel knew her grandson had just crossed paths with someone who would leave a lasting mark on his soul. Maddie Okon resumed work at Obi Company Co. on a Monday morning with a calm smile and a heart determined to prove herself. She arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a clean, modest gown and simple flats, her natural hair pulled back into a bun. Though she blended in with the crowd, her presence stood out almost instantly. Within hours it became clear, Maddie was not just another employee. She was a storm of grace, intellect, and quiet excellence. Every task assigned to her was completed with detail, insight, and speed. She asked thoughtful questions, organized files no one had touched in years, and suggested systems to improve financial transparency. She didn't try to impress anyone, she just did her job, and she did it exceptionally well. Xavier Andrews Obi, seated in his sleek, top-floor office with tinted glass and minimal decor, found himself drawn to the screens of his private CCTV monitors far more than usual. He had always kept eyes on operations. It was second nature for a CEO. But now his gaze kept finding one person, Maddie. He watched her speak to staff with respect, smile politely at security guards, work silently through lunch breaks, and manage files like someone twice her age. She was only 24 yet. She carried herself with the wisdom and poise of someone who had lived many lives. She didn't gossip, didn't flirt, didn't try to stand out. She just delivered results, brilliantly. By the end of her first week, she presented a report that would shake the very foundation of Xavier's trust in his previous employees. She had balanced all 6 years of company accounts and in doing so, discovered something shocking. Money had been disappearing quietly, cleverly, layer by layer. Her work exposed financial loopholes, unnecessary expenditures, and questionable sign-offs. Xavier felt his jaw clench as he scanned her findings. He had been milked, slowly and shamelessly, and no one had ever dared to tell him, until Maddie. He stared at her file, stunned. How could one person be so intelligent, so composed, so honest, and so beautiful? It almost felt unfair. She was the kind of woman who didn't just change processes, she changed the atmosphere. Since her arrival, the company had begun to feel different. Certain shady staff had started resigning quietly. Documents that used to land on Xavier's desk without explanation were now thoroughly vetted. Maddie asked tough, intelligent questions before allowing anything through. No more frivolous payments. No more carelessness. She had quietly become the gatekeeper. Still, he said nothing. He just watched, from his office, from his screen, from afar. But what unsettled Xavier the most was his own reaction when he saw another colleague hovering around Maddie, a young analyst named Tope, who clearly enjoyed her company. He made her laugh, offered to bring her coffee, and found every excuse to pass by her desk. Xavier hated it. He didn't know why. He wasn't the type to meddle. But every time he saw her laugh at Tope's jokes, something twisted inside him. Something strange. Something new, and so he kept watching. Not as a CEO this time, but as a man who was slowly, helplessly, beginning to feel something more. Morning arrived with the same corporate rhythm. Hustle, files passed between desks, and urgent emails flying across screens. Maddie Okon arrived early, as usual, calm and collected, her hair pinned back neatly. A soft, pink lipstick bringing subtle life to her face. She had barely settled into her chair when she heard the familiar voice of Tope, the lively and ever-playful analyst who had taken a liking to her from her first week. He leaned casually on the edge of her desk, his sleeves rolled up, trying once again to charm her. "Maddie," he said with a wide grin, "it's Friday. You can't say no today. Lunch on me. There's a new bistro around the corner, and I know someone as smart as you could use a break." Maddie laughed lightly. "You're persistent, Tope." He raised a playful brow. "Persistent and hopeful." She smiled politely. "I'll think about it." Unbeknownst to her, Xavier Andrews Obi had been watching the entire exchange unfold from his office via CCTV. At first, he simply observed, but then something tight and irrational began to stir in his chest. He didn't like the way Tope leaned toward her. He didn't like the way she smiled back, and he especially didn't like the fact that it wasn't the first time. Without even thinking it through, Xavier pressed the intercom. "Tell Miss Okon to report to my office now." Within minutes, Maddie appeared at his door, notepad in hand, her expression neutral but questioning. "Good morning, sir," she greeted. He didn't respond immediately, just looked at her. Really looked. She stood tall, composed, intelligent. Everything about her irritated him and fascinated him all at once. "Morning," he said finally, then glanced down at a random file as if he had summoned her for something official. The silence stretched between them. Maddie waited. Then his voice dropped slightly. "You need to concentrate more on work and stop entertaining distractions." Her brow furrowed. "Distractions, sir?" Xavier looked up, his gaze sharp. "This is a professional environment. No need for office flirtations." Realization dawned on her, and her lips parted slightly in surprise. Was he referring to Toby? "I wasn't." "Just focus on your job," he cut in curtly. Maddie nodded, swallowing her confusion. "Yes, sir." She turned and walked out, a quiet mix of embarrassment and curiosity swirling in her chest. Back at her desk, she struggled to focus. She stared at her screen, but her mind kept drifting. Why did he keep calling her in whenever she was talking to a male colleague? This wasn't the first time. There had been 3 others in the past week. Small interactions that somehow triggered his attention, and yet he never gave her a clear reason, never expressed outright concern. Just vague words, cold warnings. But why? Xavier, in his glass-walled office, was restless. He stared at his screen, but all he could see was her expression when she walked out. Had he gone too far? Probably, but the thought of her laughing with Tope again made something boil inside him. That evening, he arrived home earlier than usual. His steps were heavy, his mood sour. Mama Rachel looked up from her crossword puzzle as he walked into the living room, tossed his keys on the console, and collapsed onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. "You're back early," she said, eyeing him with amused suspicion. "And from the look on your face, someone didn't eat the lunch you packed." He grunted in response. "Let me guess," she continued, already sensing the cause. "Maddie?" Xavier didn't reply at first. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled deeply. "She can't just do her job," he snapped. "Every time I see her, she's smiling with some man. Tope today, the security guard yesterday. Who knows who next?" Mama Rachel's brows rose. "Are you jealous?" "I'm not jealous," he said too quickly. "I'm irritated. She should focus. She answers to me, not everyone else." There was silence. Then Mama Rachel leaned back with a knowing smile. "You don't even hear yourself, do you?" Xavier looked away, his jaw clenched. "She's not flirting, Xavier. She's just being kind, courteous. That's who she is. That's the heart that made her give up her phone for me. Don't punish her for it. She doesn't have to be that friendly," he muttered. "She doesn't have to answer to only you either," his grandmother added gently. The room was quiet again. Then she rose, walked over, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Take it easy, my dear. You're falling in love, and you don't even know how to handle it. But if you're not careful, you'll push her away before you even get the chance to find out what this could become." Xavier said nothing, but those words settled heavily on his heart, because maybe, just maybe, they were true. Maddie Okon arrived early, as always. Her steps were purposeful, her energy focused. She greeted the receptionist with a smile and made her way to her desk with a small bag of akara and bread for breakfast, her usual humble start to the day. The office was slowly filling up, but she was already buried in an audit sheet when Xavier walked in. "Good morning, sir," she said, eyes briefly lifting from her system. "Yay," Xavier muttered without a glance in her direction. It was curt, cold, and it stung more than she cared to admit. He was still mad, still upset. And Maddie couldn't understand why. She hadn't done anything to offend him, at least not to her knowledge. She had become used to his moods, but lately it felt personal. Like her very presence triggered something in him. As Xavier was settling in, he glanced once again at the office screen, habitually, without thinking. And there it was, Tope standing beside Maddie's desk with that same flirty smile, leaning a little too close. "So," Tope said cheerfully, What's your weekend looking like? I was thinking dinner. Maybe some karaoke? Maddie laughed lightly. Karaoke? That's unexpected. Oh, come on, Maddie. One date, just one. I've been patient. She hesitated, then softly replied, All right, let's see how the weekend goes. Before the moment could settle, her desk phone rang. Miss Okon, the CEO would like to see you in his office. Maddie sighed, standing up. Let's see what he has to say this time, she murmured with a knowing smirk. She knocked and entered Xavier's office. You asked to see me, sir? Xavier didn't waste time. He stood up and walked to the window. Cancel all your weekend plans. You're going with me to a business conference in Abuja. Maddie blinked. I'm going with you? Yes, it's an important investor weekend. I need someone sharp beside me, and you've proven yourself. Her lips parted slightly in surprise, then slowly curved into a smile. She felt stunned, but proud. Her hard work was being recognized. But part of her couldn't ignore the timing. She had said yes to Tope barely a minute ago, and now this. All right, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, she said quietly. That evening, they agreed to meet at a private rendezvous point before heading to the airport. But Maddie had a silent worry weighing on her. She had nothing to wear. Her closet held only 3 decent work outfits. Her salary so far had gone straight into clearing her student loan and sending something home to her mother. She hadn't dared to spend on herself. Xavier noticed immediately when she arrived. Her hesitation, the subtle panic in her eyes. Without a word, he drove her straight to a high-end boutique in Victoria Island. Sir, she asked, confused as they pulled in. Get what you need, he replied, already stepping out of the car. You represent the company this weekend. You need to look the part. Maddie walked into the boutique cautiously. The air smelled of luxury and everything gleamed. She picked out a deep red dress as her first trial piece. It hugged her waist, flowed around her hips, and settled just above her knees. Elegant, yet striking. When she stepped out of the changing room, Xavier looked up from his phone and froze. His breath caught in his chest. He had always known she was beautiful. But this was breathtaking. For a full moment, he just stared. The way the dress brought out the warmth in her skin, the confidence in her stride, the quiet glow in her eyes. It all hit him at once. He forced himself to look away, clearing his throat. Try something else. We don't have all day. Maddie smiled slightly, unaware of the battle he was fighting. She picked out 3 more outfits, business casuals with matching heels and accessories. By the time they walked out, the boutique staff were all smiles, and Xavier had already paid the bill. As they got into the car, Maddie turned to him sincere. Sir, thank you. I promise to pay back once I receive my next salary. He glanced at her. Don't bother. You just need to look responsible. That's all. She nodded slowly, touched but confused. The drive to the airport was silent. Maddie stared out the window, her thoughts spinning. Xavier's mood always seemed to shift. One moment warm, the next cold. He noticed her, helped her, but then he'd pull away like she had done something wrong. She leaned her head against the window, exhaling. Was it something she did? Or did he just hate her and couldn't decide why? The hum of the airplane engine was the only sound around Maddie as she sat in her seat, flipping through her well-organized folder. She had spent the entire flight to Abuja immersed in studying every detail of the upcoming business conference. Panelist profiles, discussion themes, competitor data, Xavier's scheduled appearance. It was all etched into her mind like clockwork. She wasn't just going to attend. She was going to support him, represent the company, earn her place. By the time they landed, dusk had settled over Abuja. The hotel they checked into was grand, luxurious, and refined. Maddie tried not to look impressed as the concierge ushered her to her suite, but it was her first time staying in such an elegant place. Despite her excitement, she remained focused, reviewing notes late into the night, determined to be flawless the next day. And she was. From the moment the conference began, Maddie was a revelation. She moved confidently, responded to impromptu questions with authority, whispered key figures to Xavier just before his speeches, and ensured their materials were prepped before each session. Xavier barely had to ask for anything. She was always one step ahead. Watching her, he was blown away. She wasn't just smart, she was precise, intuitive, and polished. She made his job easier, his presence stronger, and the company shine brighter. He found himself admiring her not only for her competence, but for her calm under pressure. And when they received a standing ovation after his keynote address, he knew he had made the right choice bringing her. That night, back at the hotel, Maddie sat on her bed with her legs crossed, finally relaxing. She wore an oversized tee and leggings, her hair loose over her shoulders. Her phone buzzed and her face lit up at the caller ID. Mama Rachel. They had built an unexpected bond over the past few months. The older woman checked in on her often, sometimes just to say hello. Tonight, Mama Rachel's voice was soft and motherly, like a balm to Maddie's exhausted spirit. My darling, how did the conference go? It went well, Ma, Maddie replied, her voice filled with quiet joy. I was nervous, but everything went smoothly. My boss didn't say much, but I think he was pleased. Mama Rachel chuckled on the other end. If he didn't complain, then yes, he was very pleased. Maddie hesitated, then sighed. Ma, he's always so cold to me, like I've done something wrong. Sometimes I feel like he resents me being around. I don't know what I'm doing to upset him. Mama Rachel was silent for a moment, her heart aching. She had to bite her tongue not to reveal that the man Maddie was describing, the moody, complicated boss, was her grandson. She knew Xavier well, too well, and she could tell he was falling, and falling hard. Don't worry about him, my dear, she said softly. Continue doing your job well. That's your focus. Keep your light shining. Maddie smiled faintly. Thank you, Ma. You always know the right things to say. They said their goodbyes and Maddie crawled into bed, feeling lighter. She had no idea how closely their worlds were connected, or how deep Xavier's struggle really ran. The next evening, their flight back to Lagos was delayed. Hours passed before they finally boarded, and by the time the plane touched down, it was 2:07 a.m. Maddie yawned, pulling her cardigan tighter as they walked through the near-empty airport terminal. I'll just get a cab home, she murmured sleepily. Xavier stopped walking. No. She turned to him. Sir, you're under my care on this trip. I'm not letting you get into a car alone at 2 a.m. You're coming with me. Too tired to argue, she nodded. His driver was already waiting. The ride home was quiet, both of them too drained to speak. When they arrived at the Obi estate, the house was dim, quiet. Mama Rachel was fast asleep. Xavier led her through the front door, past the hallway, and into a guest room. You can sleep here tonight, he said quietly. We'll talk in the morning. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes drooping. He lingered for a moment, watching her settle in, then turned and went to his room. He tossed off his jacket, showered, and headed to the kitchen to make his usual late-night tea, a soothing mix of mint and hibiscus. But as he stirred the tea, thoughts of her kept intruding. The way she smiled when speaking, the grace with which she handled difficult questions, the soft thank you she had whispered before stepping into the guest room. Before he could talk himself out of it, he made a second cup. He found himself standing in front of her door, hesitant. Then he knocked gently. The door opened slowly, and there she was, radiant, effortlessly beautiful. Her hair fell softly over her shoulders, and she wore a simple but striking red silk nightgown. It wasn't provocative, it was elegant. But something about the way it hugged her body, the way her skin glowed in the hallway light, it completely stole his breath. Maddie blinked, surprised. Sir? I brought you tea, he said, voice suddenly hoarse. She smiled, accepting it. Their fingers brushed slightly. Thank you. And then they just stood there, watching each other. The air between them charged with an unspoken current. For a brief, powerful second, Maddie saw the version of Xavier no one else did, the gentle one, the thoughtful one, the man behind the mask. And he saw her, not just as his employee, but as a woman with strength, grace, and vulnerability. He swallowed hard. Good night, Maddie. Good night, sir, He turned and walked away before his heart could do something reckless. But as he lay in bed, the taste of the tea on his lips, he knew one thing for certain. He was losing the battle with himself, and he didn't know how much longer he could fight it. The soft morning light filtered into the guest room of the Obi mansion as Maddie Okon sat quietly on the edge of the bed. The teacup from the night before still sat on the side table, now cold. She glanced at it one last time, thinking about the man who had brought it to her, the man who was her boss, the man who confused her, the man who made her heart do strange, fluttery things she had no business feeling. It was too much. She quietly slipped into her clothes, packed her bag, and tiptoed down the grand staircase, determined to leave without waking anyone. She thought it best to slip away unnoticed. They would see each other at the office anyway, and pretending last night hadn't happened was easier than facing it head-on. But as she reached the foot of the stairs, a familiar voice stilled her. "Maddie!" She turned and froze. There, standing in the hallway in a silk robe and house slippers, was Mama Rachel. Obi. Maddie's heart dropped. Her lips parted, but no words came. The pieces clicked together too quickly. The house, the way she moved through it, the resemblance to Xavier, the knowing tone in her voice every time they spoke about work. You live here?" Maddie asked in a whisper, her voice trembling. Mama Rachel nodded gently. "Yes, I do. This is my home. Xavier is my grandson." Silence descended like a heavy curtain. Maddie's bag slipped slightly from her shoulder, but she didn't notice. "You knew?" she whispered, her throat tightening. "I did. And you never told me?" Maddie's eyes welled up. "Mama, I confided in you. I told you things I couldn't tell anyone. I talked about him, about how I felt, how confused I was. And you just let me." "I never wanted to deceive you, Maddie," Mama Rachel said softly, stepping forward. I wanted you to get to know each other without expectations, without assumptions, to see the real versions of yourselves. Not the CEO, not the grandmother of the CEO, just two souls, connecting." Maddie shook her head, tears now gathering in the corners of her eyes. "But you let me walk around blind. You let me feel foolish. Was this a test? Some kind of game?" "No," Mama Rachel replied, emotion rising in her own voice. "It was never a game. I've watched you blossom into something extraordinary, and I didn't want to be the one to shape your opinion of Xavier or his opinion of you. I wanted the both of you to arrive at whatever this is on your own." "But I trusted you," Maddie said, her voice cracking. "You were the one person I felt safe with." A silence fell between them, painful and raw. Maddie stepped back. "Please, just tell him I'll see him at the office." With that, she turned and walked toward the door, leaving behind a part of her that had hoped for more. Xavier awoke around 8 a.m. feeling unusually restless. He reached for his phone, then rubbed his eyes and remembered. Maddie had stayed the night. A small, almost unfamiliar smile crept onto his lips. But when he stepped into the guest room, the bed was empty, sheets neatly folded. No sign of her. His chest tightened. She hadn't said goodbye, hadn't even knocked. He walked into the living room to find Mama Rachel sitting by the large glass windows, a steaming mug of tea in her hand, her face calm but reflective. "She's gone?" he asked. His grandmother nodded. "She didn't even tell me." "She ran into me this morning," Mama Rachel said, setting her mug down gently. "She found out." Xavier's expression shifted. "You told her?" "She figured it out. The house, me being here, it all came together." "I didn't deny it." He stared at her. "Why didn't you just tell her before? Why didn't you tell her from the very beginning?" "Because I didn't want to interfere," she replied, her voice steady. "I didn't want her to treat you differently because of me. I wanted her to form her own opinion of you. And I wanted you to see her clearly, without my influence." Xavier looked down, conflicted. "She's upset. She thinks we played with her, with her emotions." Mama Rachel stood and walked over to him. She reached up and touched his shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. "She's not upset because of what I didn't say. She's upset because she's starting to care for you. And she doesn't know if you feel the same. She feels blindsided, confused, like she's standing in a story she doesn't understand. Xavier didn't speak. His thoughts were loud, too loud. She's not a girl you toy with, Xavier. She's a woman. A smart, loyal, beautiful woman who deserves honesty. And I believe you love her. You just don't know how to say it. He looked at his grandmother slowly. She's different, isn't she? Mama Rachel added with a smile. She shook something awake in you. Xavier didn't reply, because yes, she had. And now that she had walked away, all he wanted to do was run after her. The energy in the office that morning was steady. Emails flying, printers humming, and the low murmur of meetings in motion. But Maddie Okon walked in with a heart wrapped in quiet disappointment. She was dressed in her usual polished style, gray skirt, crisp blouse, her hair neatly pulled back, but something about her felt dimmed. She greeted everyone with her usual grace, but there was a subtle shift in her smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. She headed straight to her desk, eyes avoiding the hallway that led to Xavier's office. She hadn't spoken to him since she left the mansion. She didn't know what to say. What could she say after finding out she'd been caught in a story bigger than she imagined? And just when she was trying to focus, trying to pretend her emotions weren't swirling underneath the surface, the elevator chimed, and out stepped Mama Rachel. Obi heads turned. It wasn't every day the legendary matriarch of the Obi dynasty walked into the main office floor. Maddie looked up and froze. Mama Rachel walked toward her with slow, deliberate steps, dressed in a pale blue lace buba and IRO with a soft matching gel. Her presence, as always, was graceful yet commanding. She stopped at Maddie's desk, and the room held its breath. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. Maddie hesitated, then nodded. She stood and followed her to the quiet meeting room adjacent to the corridor. As soon as the door closed, Mama Rachel reached out and gently took Maddie's hands. "My child," she said with warmth and sorrow in her voice, "I owe you a sincere apology." Maddie blinked, unsure how to respond. "I didn't mean to keep the truth from you to hurt you. I simply wanted you and Xavier to find each other without names or titles. I wanted him to see your heart. I never imagined it would feel like a betrayal to you." Maddie swallowed hard, emotion rising in her chest. "Mama, it just felt like I was left in the dark, like I was being watched while I struggled to understand him." "I understand," Mama Rachel said, "and I'm so sorry for the pain that caused. But I also want you to know that Xavier has changed because of you. He won't say it yet. He's too afraid of what he feels. But I see it. You bring him peace, Maddie, the kind he hasn't known in a long time." Maddie's eyes dropped. "It's hard to tell. He keeps pushing me away." Mama Rachel smiled knowingly. "That's how you know it's real. He's fighting it because it's stronger than he expected. But give him a chance. He just might surprise you." Just then, the meeting room door opened. Xavier. His eyes flickered between them, his grandmother, seated calmly, and Maddie, standing with her arms folded gently across her waist. "Maddie," he said, his voice quieter than usual, "can I talk to you? Alone?" Mama Rachel stood. "I'll give you both a moment." She gently squeezed Maddie's hand before leaving the room. Xavier walked in and closed the door behind him. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at her, the woman who had turned his world inside out. "I didn't want you to find out like that," he finally said. "I should have told you." Maddie looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You think?" He winced a little. "I've been unfair to you, and cold, and confusing. I know that." She didn't interrupt. She let him speak. "I did it because I didn't know what to do with how I feel about you." A pause. Then he stepped closer. "You've changed everything, Maddie. The way you work, the way you carry yourself, the way you've challenged me to be better without even trying. You've made me feel things I buried a long time ago." Her breath hitched. "I know I've messed up, but if you'll let me, I'd like to fight for this. For you." He looked at her, heart in his eyes, vulnerability in every word. Maddie didn't speak yet. but something in her softened. For the first time, she saw Xavier, the man, not the CEO, and he was fighting for her. The air in the room was so still it felt like the universe was holding its breath. Maddie Okon looked into Xavier's eyes, searching for anything false, any hint that this was just another fleeting corporate romance. But all she saw was sincerity, vulnerability, and a kind of emotional hunger that mirrored her own. The CEO mask was gone. The man standing in front of her was just Xavier, raw, real, and fully present. "I feel it too," she finally whispered. Her voice was calm, but her heart was racing. "I've tried to stay professional, tried to ignore the way you affect me, but I can't keep pretending. So yes, Xavier, I'm saying yes to exploring this, to letting you in, to being consumed by you." He didn't smile. Not immediately. Instead, his eyes softened, and a deep breath escaped his chest like someone who'd been holding it in for far too long. When his smile did come, it wasn't the confident smirk she was used to. It was gentle, reverent, and full of silent gratitude. And from that moment forward, he never stopped choosing her. He showed her with actions. It started with the first real gesture, meeting her mother. He showed up at their modest apartment the following Saturday, dressed simply in a charcoal gray native attire, carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers in a fruit basket. Her mother, curious but kind, welcomed him in with warm eyes and wise silence. As they sat on the faded couch, Xavier turned to her with respect in his tone. "Ma, you've raised a phenomenal woman. Since the day she stepped into my company, she's revolutionized everything. Our structure, our integrity, our profits. But more than that, she's touched lives, especially mine. And I would be honored to love her the right way." Her mother blinked, stunned into silence. Slowly, tears gathered in her eyes. "She's all I have," she whispered. "And I will protect her like she's all I have too," he said. That same weekend, Xavier signed the lease for a new apartment in Lekki Phase 1, a safe, stylish, two-bedroom flat with a view of the lagoon. Maddie had protested, of course, until her mother gently squeezed her hand and said, "You deserve beautiful things, my daughter. Stop fighting it. You're not a burden. You are a blessing." That night, Xavier took her to La Fleur, an exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking their city. Candles flickered on their table. The music was soft. Lagos pulsed beneath them like a heartbeat. Maddie wore a long emerald gown that hugged her figure and shimmered in the candlelight. Xavier hadn't taken his eyes off her since they left the car. He watched her laugh. He listened to her speak about dreams, fears, and memories she hadn't shared with anyone before. "I lost my dad when I was 10, she said, tracing the rim of her wine glass. "We couldn't afford proper care. He died in pain. That's when I swore to be more, to never be helpless." Xavier reached across the table, took her hand gently in his. "I lost mine at 18, car accident. They both died instantly. That night changed everything. Their pain mirrored each other's, but so did their resilience. And in that moment, they knew. This wasn't just love, it was understanding. It was home." "I want to build a life with you," Xavier said softly. "Not someday. I mean now, in real time. Through work, pressure, chaos, and love. I want you in it all." Tears touched the corners of Maddie's eyes. "I want that too. No more hiding." They held hands as they walked into the night. Back at his penthouse, the silence was warm, heavy, intimate. When Xavier kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, devout, a silent promise. He took his time with her, unzipped her gown like it was made of gold, touched her like she was sacred. He worshipped every inch of her, her curves, her scars, her soul. His hands didn't just explore, they adored. His lips didn't just kiss, they blessed. And when he entered her, it wasn't just bodies meeting. It was two hearts finally saying what words hadn't dared to. Their souls danced that night. Their pain melted, their love ignited. He whispered her name like a vow. She clung to him like an anchor. And as they lay tangled in each other, skin against skin, heartbeat to heartbeat, Maddie whispered, "I love you." Xavier kissed her forehead. I've loved you since the moment you gave your phone to a stranger, and I'll love you every day after this. Back at Obi Company, everything felt different, lighter, more alive. And Xavier Andrews Obi walked through the halls like a man whose soul had finally been given permission to breathe. He had Maddie, and that was all he needed to know. She wasn't just the woman he loved. She was the backbone of his company now, the voice of reason in his chaos, the calm in the middle of his storm. Every time he passed her office, saw her focused expression, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her brows furrowed in thought, he smiled to himself. She was his, and he was hers. Not even Tope, who still lingered around her desk every now and then with jokes or unnecessary questions, could ruffle him anymore. He no longer saw competition, he saw security. Maddie had proven her heart, her loyalty, her love, over and over again. And now the fear that had once lived in Xavier's chest had no more space. She wasn't going anywhere. The company had grown 3 times its worth since she joined, and with every passing month, new deals rolled in, fresh investors came knocking, and their reputation soared. Even business competitors couldn't help but ask, "Who is this Maddie girl, and where did she come from?" Xavier didn't hesitate to tell them, "She's our miracle." During work hours, he'd steal moments with her. Some days he'd call her into his office just to hold her waist for 5 seconds, kiss her cheek, or rest his forehead against hers when the weight of decisions grew heavy. It was effortless, like breathing. And Maddie? She had never felt more seen, more cherished, more alive. Xavier treated her like she was made of stars, not just with his words, but with his actions. He honored her opinion, protected her peace, and reminded her every single day how deeply loved she was. "This is more than what I prayed for," she told him one afternoon, curled up on the office couch in his arms. "You're more." He kissed her hand and replied, "You're everything." Mama Rachel watched it all with a heart full of peace. Her grandson had changed, not in a loud way, but in a deep, soul-level way. He smiled more. He laughed freely. He remembered to rest, to breathe. He had found a partner, a purpose, a reason to hope. And for the first time in a long time, Mama Rachel no longer feared what the future would bring when she was no longer here. She could finally rest, knowing her grandson was in good hands. Hands that would love, protect, and steady him. Always. One quiet evening, the air scented with jasmine and soft garden soil, Maddie and Xavier sat together in the Obi estate's back garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in golds and pinks, and Maddie lay with her head on his lap, her fingers gently grazing the edge of a flower pot nearby. "It's funny," she whispered. "What is?" he asked, brushing her curls off her face. "How it all started," she murmured. "Just one moment of kindness. That's all it was, and now look at my life." He smiled down at her. "You changed mine with that moment." Maddie sat up slowly, her eyes locked on his. Kindness. It's the beacon. It's the seed of hope. Everything we need is on the other side of it. Always. Xavier cupped her face and kissed her softly, his voice full of awe. "God gave me the best gift when he gave me you. I'm the luckiest man alive, Maddie." She smiled, her heart full, her hands wrapped around his. And in that quiet garden, wrapped in love, purpose, and answered prayers, 2 souls who were once strangers now carried the weight of forever together.